Today we're going to be talking about invasive insects and other invertebrates. I'm joined today by a Master Gardener volunteer, Mary Povinsky. So first off, I just want to review for those of you that are not aware what invasive species is, because the definition is really important in kind of defining what it is that we're talking about. So first off, it's a non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration. So we're talking about Orange County, New York. So this is something that's not evolved in our ecosystem. It's not from here, we've brought it from somewhere else. And the second part is also really important, that introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. So not only is it something that has been brought in, there's lots of things that are brought in that kind of coexist with us. We don't even really notice them. But this is something that either is causing economic harm, whether to our landscape or our crops, or environmental harm, destroying our ecosystems, or, there's also things that harm human health. So those are the two things that have to go together to make invasive species. So today we're going to be talking about insects and other invertebrates. So invertebrates are things without backbones. Insects don't have backbones. So that's what we'll be talking today in terms of invasive species, but there's also, vertebrate invasive species as well as plants. But we're not going to be talking about those so much today. So why do we care about all these insect and other invertebrate species that have invaded us? Well, they kill our native plants. A lot of them are really detrimental to our plants, which leads to the destruction of our ecosystems. Everything's kind of in a really nice balance. And when you take one plant out, that can really have huge detrimental effects on everything around it. They also destroy our crops and landscape plants. So this is where the economics come. If farmers are trying to grow something and insects are destroying it, that can be a real problem. They also can be a really big nuisance. We'll be talking about spotted lanternfly today, but if you've been in an area with spotted lanternfly, they are just annoying. They kind of fly at you, fly on you, land on you. And also some can cause harm to humans, whether they sting or bite or poisonous. So let's talk first about a few common invasive species. These are things that are you've probably seen. They're all around us. Maybe you didn't realize they were invasive. Let's start off with emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer was first detected in 2002 near Detroit. And since then it has killed millions of ash trees, mostly east of there, a little bit west. That's where the ash trees are. So signs that you have emerald ash borer: if you have an ash tree, chances are you have it, or your trees are already dead here in Orange County. So the first thing you're going to see is some thinning of your canopy, followed by some suckering. So this is the tree trying to stay alive, right? The insect larvae feeds right below the bark, so the nutrients aren't able to move up and down the tree. So since they can't move down into the part without leaves, they said, we'll just put leaves out there so you can see all this suckering towards the bottom of the tree. Just the tree's last-ditch effort to survive. Then a lot of people notice it first when they start seeing woodpecker damage on their trees. They don't notice the defoliation. The tree still looks okay, but the woodpeckers know that there's larvae in there to eat. As woodpeckers come after your tree and the bark starts peeling off. Eventually, your bark will peel off completely, and you can see this is where the larvae were feeding, right under the bark.
Wow.
They feed on the phloem, which is what transports nutrients up and down the tree. And so nutrients can't reach the bottom part of the tree. So how do you manage this awful pest? Well, it's really important. If you're going to treat, you have to treat before there's any evidence of decline. Once you start seeing defoliation in your canopy, it's too late. So if you have any ash trees on your property, you should, if you want to save them and you haven't noticed any decline, then you should call an arborist and treat them. But for the most part, most ash trees in Orange County are either dead or very near to death. I haven't seen any really healthy ones recently. But if you happen to have a healthy one, they're called lingering ashes, and they're very rare native ashes that stay healthy after all the nearby native ashes are dead. And so they're really looking for these. They want to get the genetics out of these trees so that they can perhaps propagate more ash trees that will linger, that will survive the attack of this creature. So if you do see them, please visit monitoringash.org. They'll give you information about how you can report lingering ashes, and they'll come out and they'll look at your tree. Perhaps if it's seeding, they'll take the seeds, whatever it is, so that we can hopefully restore the ash trees in our area. So another forest pests seem to be the new trend, is Hemlock woolly Adelgid. So this was introduced into New York in the 80s. You can see here some really great pictures of it. It only attacks hemlock trees. So it creates these woolly masses on the bottoms of the branches. Here's really close up. This is the crawling stage of it. And this cottony mass kind of helps protect them over the winter. So they have also, just like the emerald ash borer, they've killed so many trees. We have a few less hemlock trees, so they've only killed tens of thousands of trees. And you can see this is a forest where the hemlock trees are just completely wiped out. So some signs and symptoms. Let's see, you have hemlock woolly adelgid. Well, you see those pictures we showed earlier of those cottony woolly masses. And if you have hemlock trees in your property, I would highly recommend going and looking for those if you haven't already, because they're probably there. They're on most hemlock trees. You also see a lack of new buds. The insects feed and prevent nutrients from reaching the end of the branches, so you're not going to get any new buds in a tree. So these trees here are in decline. You're not seeing any new growth on them. They're starting to die back. You're starting to see the needle loss here on these trees right here. So this is kind of what your trees look when they started to decline. Now, fortunately, you can treat these even after you found the insect on them. There are some systemic pesticides that can be used on your hemlock trees. Systemic meaning that they move throughout the tree, so you don't have to spray the top of the canopy. This person right here is doing a basal bark application where they spray the insecticide on the bottom 4 or 5 feet of the tree, and that is soaked in by the tree. Now this does require a pesticide applicator certification to do this. You can find one of those easily. There's also soil drenches where you're actually putting the insecticide into the soil, and the tree is then intaking that, and it will spread throughout the tree. These are best done in the spring when new growth is coming out. So if you go out and scout your trees today and you find you have some hemlock woolly adelgid, you want to try and save those trees, you can definitely look into contacting a pesticide applicator and scheduling something for the spring. All right, so now we're going to go to one of everyone's favorite, Japanese beetle. Now, fortunately, from my observations, this year was not a very large, there was not a huge infestation of Japanese beetles, but who knows what next year will bring. So Japanese beetles, they were introduced in 1916, so they've been around for quite a while. They're found in most of the United States. And they actually, both life stages of two of their life stages are a big pest. We have our white grubs, which are huge pests in lawns and turf. And then we have their adult beetles that eat anything from roses to zinnias to grapes, kind of feed on most things. So let's talk about lawns first. So in your lawns, the signs and symptoms, a gradual thinning, a yellowing, and a weakening. They feed on the roots. So they're very irregular in their patches. And eventually the patches will increase in size if you have a large infestation. And your turf may wilt, right? It's not being able to get that water through the roots because they've been eaten. And it will feel spongy, and that has to do with the, once again, like destruction of roots. And then finally, if you have a huge infestation, you'll see skunks and raccoons digging in it. So that's what this bottom picture is. This is damage done, the secondary damage, not done by the pest, but by predators of the pest. So here is the life cycle of the Japanese beetle, right? So they come out, this year they didn't come out until very late June. They were very late this year because of our weird spring. And they defoliate. And then come July, they start mating, laying their eggs, the egg hatch, and you get these little white grubs that are feeding on the roots. And as the season progresses, they get larger and they go further down into the soil. Then they overwinter as larvae in the soil. Then in the springtime, they move up and then they pupate and they come out as adults. So the best time, if you have a lawn and you have an infestation of Japanese beetle grubs, the best time to treat is right about now. So what you want to do first before you treat, you always want to make sure you have a problem. It's not a good thing to just blanket treat your lawn for grubs every year, because chances are you don't have grubs every year. So, if you have a place that you are really concerned about, you want to do a little bit more sampling, as opposed to like large areas where you're not as concerned. And how you want to scout it is you take a shovel and you cut a square foot of turf and you peel it back and you count the number of grubs there. And the only time you need to treat for grubs has been, they've looked at models and what they've determined causes significant damage or causes damage that needs treatment is 8 to 10 grubs per square foot. So if you're only finding one grub in every other sample or 3 grubs in every sample, it's not necessary to treat your lawn. It's not going to cause huge problems. So some things you can use to treat. So there's a few biological controls. This grub right here has been infected with entomopathic nematodes that they find their way inside and they eat the grub from the inside out. You can also find fungal and some pathogens. So that's a fungus that will kill the grubs. And then there's also a bacteria called milky spore that you can also apply to your lawn to help get rid of grubs. If you're interested in a chemical management, remember the best time to treat is in late summer, so right about now, summer. And you always want to scout before you treat. You don't want to just treat your lawn every year. And we'll provide some in the follow-up email. I'll provide some more resources. You can see what pesticides you might want to use. All right, so that was the lawn side of Japanese beetles. They also attack our landscapes and gardens, so they're just overall awful pest. So what you're gonna notice there, you're gonna see some skeletonization. So here are some 2 adults, and they're just like completely skeletonizing the leaves. They usually leave the veins. I've seen they look very lacy, the leaves. They also attack flowers. This is rose. Roses are one of their favorite things to eat. And sometimes you'll see huge aggregations of them on things like roses, where they're all kind of get together to mate and to eat your beautiful flowers. Management is very different in your lawn than it is in your landscape. So first thing I want to emphasize is do not get a trap. Here's a trap that has trapped probably hundreds, if not 1,000 or so Japanese beetles. Putting a trap in your yard, it uses a pheromone that attracts them. You will attract more Japanese beetles to your house than you would if you did not have a trap. So we do highly discourage getting traps, unless you just want to collect Japanese beetles. In that case, go for it. Another way, if you have a small tree or shrub that you want to protect, exclusion netting is recommended. You know, the Japanese beetles, you know, they're quite large, which is great. So you can put a net around a small tree or shrub. Another thing that a lot of people do is just hand removal. You know, you get a cup of soapy water and you just knock them in. They usually fall down when they're trying to escape. So just make sure you have your cup of water under it. They do also fly, so sometimes they will fly away, but you can probably get quite a few, especially, you know, if you have a small area of grapes or roses or zinnias. So when it comes to insecticides, again, I'll include some in the resources that we send out, as well as the resources attached to when this posted on YouTube will have some insecticide options for you. Another pest that's been around for a while is the spongy moth. So the spongy moth was formerly known as gypsy moth. And it was introduced in 1869. Someone wanted to use them for silk production and they escaped, and they didn't work for silk production either. So yay for silk. They're known as the Great Defoliator. This is a picture of Wisconsin in 2010 during an outbreak year. And you can see this is the middle of the summer. So these trees should all be green and they've all been defoliated. Now, luckily, you know, it's a great defoliator. Trees can withstand defoliation for several years before, you know, before they start to die, before they become really stressed out. So if your trees are defoliated one year, it's not a big deal. They usually leaf back out. If it happens, you know, 3, 4, or 5 years in a row, then you're gonna start having issues. Wanted to look at the life cycle of the spongy moth. So right now we are in this area right here. I think most of the adults have pretty much died at this point, and really we're just seeing egg masses. I was up across the river yesterday and I saw lots and lots of egg masses. And that's how they overwinter. And then come April, May, the eggs will hatch and you'll see lots of little larvae. Then they pupate. There was a big couple weekends where there was spongy moths flying all around. That's when they make their eggs. What you're gonna see if you have spongy moth, you're gonna see a lot of defoliation. They eat everything. They eat hardwoods and softwoods. So really, they eat everything and they just take it out, right? This is just like the central vein of the leaf straight. You also see aggregations of the larvae. So the spongy moth larvae like to aggregate and they feed in large groups. They also move up and down the trunk. So you'll see them on the leaves, but you can also see them moving up and down. You also see once they pupate, they kind of pupate, usually large clumps of pupa, pupal casings will appear. And then finally, you'll see the adults and the eggs. So anything flat, so you don't see them on lawn chairs and picnic tables and other things that you have in your yard. So in terms of management, so right now we're dealing with the egg stage. So An article just came out in Entomology Today that talked about a study that was done looking at ways of managing spongy moth, and they found that golden pest spray oil was super effective. So it's an oil you spray it on the egg masses, and you have a very long window. You can spray them now. You can spray them in a month. You can spray them in 2 months. You can spray them next spring before the eggs hatch. The active ingredient in this is 92% soybean oil. I do not go out and just buy soybean oil and spray them. You should definitely get something that has been formulated for this treatment to spray on your egg masses. And that's a way of controlling populations. You're obviously not going to get all of them, but it will at least bring populations down. Next spring, when the caterpillars are back out, we recommend using a burlap trap. They're really easy to make. Take a strip of burlap, you tie it around your tree, you fold it down. But I said the caterpillars tend to move up and down the tree. So when they move back up the tree, they get stuck under the burlap plaque. Then you go every day and you check it out and you take the caterpillars and throw them in soapy water. That's another easy way. Now, if you have a widespread infestation, you have several acres, that's when you really need to contact an arborist. We recommend going to treesaregood.org. This is sponsored by the International Society of Arboriculturalists, and this will give you people that are certified arborists. So that was some well-established pests. They've been around for a while. You know, we see them populations fluctuate. Now we're going to talk about our newest established invasive insect. It's kind of been all over the news the past couple of years, but it's finally made it up to Orange County. Chances are you'll be seeing it very soon, and that is spotted lanternfly. So spotted lanternfly was introduced in 2014 in Bucks County, PA, which is this county right here, kind of in the crotch of New Jersey. And it's been spreading. So this is the current map of where it is. It was found in Orange County in 2020. And it is being spread by us. We are spreading it. When it came in Orange County, it spread up I-84. It's spreading up. You can see this is the thruway. It's spreading up the thruway. So really, we are the ones that are spreading it. It flies, but it's not a great flyer. But it lays its eggs on anything, and it will cling to anything and take a ride. So here is the life cycle of the spotted lanternfly. Currently, we may still have some fourth instars. Adults are starting to appear, and then a little bit they'll start laying some eggs. Then it overwinters its eggs, and then in the spring we'll get some instars. So the first 3 instars are black with white spots, and the last instar the fourth instar is red with black and white markings, and then the adults. The adults are beautiful. They're about 1 inch long, but they're quite a nuisance. So some signs and symptoms. Here's what the eggs look like. They look like they're mud, so they're really easy to go undetected. You know, they can lay them on the underside of your car, on a chair, on a tent. Here's some eggs that have already hatched. Then we'll see some nymphs in the spring. The first instar is really small, and they get progressively bigger. And remember, the adult's about 1 inch in length. So this is the second instar, and this is our fourth instar. And then we have our adults. They're usually seen. You don't usually see the beautiful red under their wings. They usually have their wings shut. Another sign is sooty mold. So they are true bugs. They have sucking, piercing mouth parts, and they're continually sucking plant juices out of the plant. Now, if you're continually eating, you're also continually excreting. So they excrete what's called honeydew. It's a sticky substance, and that is something that will grow mold. It also attracts bees and wasps and ants and other undesirable creatures. But trees that are highly infested will have this like black sooty mold under them. Your house, your porch will also get this if they're under a tree with a large infestation. This is where they come in the nuisance. The only things that they're known to kill are grapes and tree of heaven, which is an invasive plant. But they are a huge nuisance, and they do also stress out our other trees. So join the battle, beat the bug in management. So the big thing is stop the spread. You want to inspect items brought from areas of known infestation. So if you go, I was in the city just this week and I saw them flying around. They landed on me. I took a train, so I didn't have to inspect my car, but if you're anywhere driving your car in New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania, that's where the huge infestations are. Make sure that you inspect everything you brought. That includes all of these things. If you're buying plants, you know, you go to Pennsylvania and buy some plants, make sure you look at the pots, make sure you look at the actual plants. If you're camping, all these things, they can lay their eggs on anything. So make sure you're checking things before you bring them back up here. Once we, if you have an infestation in your yard, one thing you do is put out sticky bands. So this is kind of a sticky material. They're known to go up and down trees, especially when they're nymphs. A lot of the eggs are laid high on the tree and the wind will blow them down, and then they'll crawl back up the tree to feed on the succulent green leaves. So they're crawling up and down the tree and they get stuck on the sticky band. One thing that's really important, if you do use a sticky band trap, is this cage on the outside. This is to prevent bycatch. So preventing birds, bats, squirrels, and chipmunks from getting stuck on the sticky trap. They're very sticky. So make sure if you are going to do a sticky trap that you do, in fact, put some kind of cage around it so that you're not catching larger animals. You also use a circle trap. This was invented and perfected by those people down in Penn State, because that's where the initial infestation was. So it can be made from household materials. It does the same thing. They're climbing up to get in this net. There's a funnel made out of the tops of some milk jugs, and then they funnel into this bag, and then you can take the bag off and freeze them or kill them in another way. And I'll include instructions on how to do that. Another thing that I found is using a vacuum. So you can vacuum. They're really fast, and so sometimes it's really hard to catch them by hand. Vacuums are better. So if you want to try that, get a shop vac. Make sure afterwards the shop vac, just the pressure may kill them, but you want to make sure that you're going to remove that, remove the carcasses, or some of them might still be alive, and make sure you're killing them so they're not, getting out of your vacuum. And then also you can scrape egg masses. So this is all different. The eggs can look like all these different things, right? These eggs are no longer there. These ones are uncovered, partially covered. They have, they look like mud. So they'll start laying eggs very soon, and you have until they hatch again in the springs to scrape them off. You can put them in soapy water, you can crush them, and you can, there's lots of different ways of destroying the egg masses, but scrape them off with something hard and then destroy them. And then finally, insecticides. New York State IPM has a comprehensive list of all the insecticides that are available for homeowners, as well as landscapers and pesticide applicators. This is an example of a tree that was treated systemically for spotted lanternfly. This is down in Pennsylvania, so they feed on the tree and then they die. So if you have a tree in your yard that becomes highly infested, that would be something you'd treat. It's been seen that there'll be three of the same tree in a yard, and they'll only really go for one of them. So it's recommended you kind of scout out where they're interested and not just treat everything. Just treat where they're really. All right, so that's what I have for you. Now I'm gonna turn it over to Mary, and Mary is gonna talk to us about a newly introduced invasive insect. Take away, Mary.
Thanks, Susan. A lot of the things that I'm going to talk about have been in the media, and when anything appears on TV or on social media, we get questions about it at farmers markets and garden helpline and all sorts of places like that. This is one that's been very, very publicized. Elm Zigzag Sawfly. I think the media likes things with funny names. And the zigzag refers to the shape of the feeding trail. You can see on there, it's a little tiny larva, and it goes up and down on a leaf. It was first detected in Quebec in 2020 and found in New York a couple of years ago, but it's really hard to trace exactly where these things are. So we're still collecting data on how far it's spread. What you'll find mostly is they feed exclusively on elm trees. And when you see the zigzag form of the feeding trail, that's a possibility. A lot of the defoliation of the tree, it's kind of like with the spongy moth, it can totally eat the leaves. The zigzag sawflies are not moths. So this isn't a caterpillar. This is a larva. And the way you tell these larvae is they're green and they have a dark band across their head. A lot of the dark green things that you see on eating leaves on plants are, any kind of moth or butterfly, caterpillar. But a sawfly larva is smaller. They're usually an inch or less, and you can check for that dark green headband. and also the zigzag trail. The feeding pattern is really kind of specific. And as I said, they only eat elm trees. So if you see a zigzag pattern and these little green creatures on an elm tree, that's what you've got. So what do? The defoliation is ongoing, and a lot of the things that apply to spongy moths also apply to this kind of defoliation. Most trees can survive a year or two of having their leaves all eaten. Unfortunately, with elm trees, you're also fighting a lot of other things like Dutch elm disease and other things that affect elm trees. So it's really tough to tell exactly what's hurting the elm tree. And the most common thing that you can do is just see what happens in year two. Maybe they'll be back, maybe they won't. And then you can talk about other kinds of management things. The sightings through map invasives are kind of, it's hard to tell exactly where they are right now, but we have people reporting them. So if you do see them, if you see this creature, the zigzag pattern, take a picture of it and send it through map invasives. They're collecting data all the time. Small populations can be removed by hand. If you see these things eating the leaves and you know you've got an elm tree that you want to save, you can pick them off, you can dump them into a cup of soapy water, all the usual ways of removing them by hand. You can also call your extension office, your local extension office. And if you're here in Orange County, that's us. And we can recommend some pesticides. You don't want to just get any kind of thing that's labeled, will kill things on trees or shrubs. You want to be very specific, because anything that's going to kill pretty much anything on a tree or a shrub can also kill things like bees and pollinators. And with pesticide recommendations for the local area, you can also find out what's legal in this state and in this county. Okay, here are my favorites. These two have been in the media so much lately. And this particular one, the first one, Hammerhead Flatworms. I think this creature was designed to scare people, even though we've pretty much been ignoring it for, more than 100 years. This is a land planaria, a flatworm. And if you remember the word planaria from high school or ninth grade, where they have these little tiny flatworms and you can cut them and they will grow from two different parts. It's a relative of this creature. It's the same kind of thing. It's a flatworm. This particular variety, and actually there's several varieties, were introduced in the 1800s, but we also have some native species. And all of these have pretty much been around, and the only people who noticed them particularly were some scientists. We've had reports and papers on them since 1890. They've probably been just hiding under rocks, which is what they do, in leaf litter. And they're very flat. Most of the ones we have here in the United States and in North America grow to a foot long or less. But if you see something that's a foot long and has this characteristic head shape, I think they like to call it hammerhead because it sounds very aggressive, but they're also called just planaria flatworms. They're not really terribly horrible. We have native species, as we just saw. The ones that we're finding now are 2 or 3 introduced species. And really about the only thing that we know is they've got a lot of publicity because they have a couple of things that are unusual even in flatworms. First, they're carnivorous. They eat earthworms. Their impact does depend on the species. Some of them eat earthworms, some of them eat slugs. A lot of them have come in and been here hiding under the leaf litter for years and years. So really what we're finding now is that people are just sort of starting to notice them. The ones that eat snails, that can be a big impact. The earthworms are also non-native. Back in 15,000 years ago, glaciers came across New York State and a lot of the Northeast, and they pretty much killed all of the native earthworms. Any earthworms that you're seeing now are mostly introduced, or actually entirely introduced from other areas. The flatworms that are eating earthworms are also eating an introduced species. Most earthworms are not particularly dangerous, except one that we're going to talk about in a minute. Management is just sort of difficult to impossible for these things. It's very hard to do much for them because there are so many of them out there. They do have kind of a toxic slime. So if you do kill one or pick one up, be sure you wash your hands immediately afterward. It's not going to kill you on touch. Some of the media reports have been saying, oh, this is the same toxin that's in blue ring octopuses and all sorts of other nasty creatures. And yeah, but in much, much, much smaller doses. So if you do see them and you want to get rid of them, best thing to do is what you do with slugs that you don't want. Just sprinkle a little salt on them. If you want to containerize them, put them in a bag or a jar or something like that before you sprinkle the salt. You can do that, but please wear gloves, wash your hands afterward. The one thing not to do is cut them up or try to squash them, because any piece that survives can generate a whole new worm. And that's why they're very commonly taught about in high school classes. Jumping worms. These are a very different species. There aren't any native earthworms in New York State. These were introduced in the 1800s, and they've been around for quite a while. The identification is that they thrash around very wildly. One of the other names for them is crazy snake worms. The clitellum, which is the white band around the outside of the worm's, it looks like a collar. It completely encircles the body, and it's milky white, unlike the earthworms that have been here for a long time, which have sort of a tan or orangish color. The body color is also kind of distinctive. You can see the differences on the graph here. They don't really look too much like the earthworms if you look at them closely, like the ones that have been here for a long time. The other signs and symptoms are what they're doing to the soil. Your soil is going to start looking different. It's uniform, it's granular, and you'll see a lot of worm castings on top. And if you don't know what worm castings look like, this is a good picture of it. A lot of that is because they are changing not the texture, but the structure of the soil. They're changing the chemical properties of the soil as well. And that's the damage that they're doing. So what happens is if you have them in the woods and forest, you'll see that instead of the lightly infected side of the graph where it shows the plants are okay, things are thick and spongy in the top areas of the soil, and the under layers of soil, the roots can grow into them. But once you get jumping worms in there, you're going to find that the new plants are stunted. They're smaller and there are few of them. A lot of the leaf litter will be almost gone because that's what these worms feed on. And soil compaction starts to take place. It gets so it's too compact for the roots to really develop correctly and develop well. You'll see a lot of them in groups. And if you have them, you'll also start seeing that your plants aren't growing very well. There's not a lot that you can do that's going to really, really take care of the problem. The first thing you need to do is try to keep them out of your garden and try to keep them out of the soil around you. And if you do have them, stop spreading it to any place or anybody else. If you have them and you want to make sure you see them, you don't know if you have them or not, what's going on, you can force them to the surface. You can mix 1/3 of a cup of ground yellow mustard seed and a gallon of water and just sort of sprinkle it and drench it over an area and see what comes up. If you see a lot of thrashing, wiggling worms with milky collars, you know what you've got. The only thing that you might not be able to see very easily is the cocoons. Cocoons they're very, very tiny. This is how the worms overwinter. And they look about the size and sometimes the color of a poppy seed or peppercorn or smaller. A lot of that is just, by chance. You can't really sieve them out or clear them out of an area. You can do solarization, which just means you put a black tarp over an area of soil, but you have to keep that tarp there for several years before you're going to have a real effect on these worms. And unfortunately, as soon as you remove the tarp and start to grow things again, if the worms are all around that area, they're just going to come back in.
Thank you so much, Mary. We talked a little bit about what invasive species are. We talked about a few common ones we have in our area, including emerald ash borer and hemlock woolly Adelgid, Japanese beetles, and spongy moth. Then we talked about the new one that's established in our area, the spotted lanternfly. Then Mary talked about our zigzag elm sawfly and 2 types of the flatworms, and then also our jumping worms. So hope that you learned a lot today.